Alrighty, folks. Welcome back to another episode of Technical Knockout, the MMA podcast. I'm your host, as always, Hussein. Today we are going to be breaking down UFC 308, Topuria versus Holloway, and everything that transpired there. And we are going to be talking about Moreno versus Albazi as well. So, first things first, let's discuss the crazy card that went down on Saturday. We saw a lot of favorites win. We saw a lot of betting favorites win, I should say, and a lot of fan favorites lose. So, starting off at the top, Ilia Topuria knocks out Max Holloway. He's the first person to do so. He gets it done in the third round. On the podcast preview, we were pretty confident in Topuria. We thought he was going to get it done. I mentioned the knockout prop, but I think overall, I just took over Ilia Topuria moneyline. So happy to see that cash. Not thrilled to see Max Holloway get knocked out, but honestly, it's been a long time coming. I felt like we were kind of due for Max to get knocked out. He's a guy who's taken a lot of punishment throughout his career. He had a stat for the most absorbed strikes in UFC history without getting knocked down, and obviously within that, without getting knocked out. So, although he still maintains the stat for the most strikes absorbed in UFC history, that knockdown and knockout stat is unfortunately no longer. And it comes at the hands of Ilia Topuria, who really capstones an incredible year for him with this knockout victory over Max Holloway, taking out Alexander Volkanovski in February and now Max Holloway in October. There's really no argument, in my opinion, that he should not be Fighter of the Year. I mean, Alex Pereira is the closest thing to an argument for that, but he beat Yuri Prochazka, Jamal Hill, and Khalil Rountree, all of which are, great fighters in their own right, but none of those fighters have the accomplishments or resume as either Volkanovski or Holloway. So I think as far as weight of the win is concerned, I think you have to give it to Ilia Topuria. Impressive victories over all-time greats. On the broadcast, I think it was either John Anik or DC, but they said that this would be like if Alex Pereira came in and knocked out John Jones and Daniel Cormier back-to-back in the same year. Obviously, Topuria and Holloway and Volkanovski are the two most recent featherweight champions before Topuria, but they are also two of the most credentialed fighters in this division's history. Two out of the top three fighters in this division's history, I would say. Obviously, Jose Aldo being the third. And now Topuria is going to put himself right up there in that conversation because, if the guy keeps doing what he's doing, I really don't know how you can deny him any longer. Finishing like every opponent, I think he only has one decision victory in the UFC, I believe, over Yusuf Zalal, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, well, he went to decision with Josh Emmett, but, we saw how much he beat him down in that fight. And regardless of if he's getting finishes or not, but he is getting mostly finishes, the guy is just super impressive and looks better and better every time we see him. So I expect Ilia Topuria to hold the belt for a long time. It's something that I've voiced on this podcast before, but I think Saturday night is just further of a testament to that. I have a long-standing bet from October of 2023, from last year, for Topuria to finish 2024 as the champion, and as soon as they dropped the line for him to finish 2025 as the champion, I took that as well. So I'm a believer in Topuria. I think he's going to be here for a while. I don't really see a way that somebody's going to be able to beat him right now. Obviously he's not perfect. He's not a perfect fighter. Nobody's perfect, but he has very little openings. I think the head kicks were something that a lot of people were concerned about, but both Volkanovski and Holloway blasted head kicks at him, and he was able to defend them and counter off of them very well. So yeah, I just don't see who can get Topuria out of there. I think maybe if he fights a very smothering grappler, that might be the case. If somebody like Movsar Evloev or even Aljamain Sterling might be able to have a good opportunity against him, but I really feel like his jiu-jitsu, his wrestling, his explosiveness are just going to be too much for those guys. So I really, I don't know what more to say. As far as the actual fight goes, I thought Topuria looked very slick. He saw everything that was coming at him from Holloway. I thought Holloway looked great too. It's not like Holloway had a bad performance. both guys were adjusting off of each other in the middle of the fight, which I thought was brilliant. This was a very high-level matchup. You could tell from the adjustments that each guy was making. For example, like Topuria would throw out the jab, and Holloway would throw out the jab. Topuria would slip it, and then Holloway turned it over into a hook and a leg kick after that. So it kind of played off of Topuria's slip, threw the head kick after Topuria was slipping as well. Topuria was able to crash inside the head kick and land to the body if he needed to. Didn't go to the body as much in this fight as he normally does, but I really feel like he goes to the body when it's appropriate to. He doesn't force it, which is a good idea because body shots can be pretty compromising for the fighter throwing them, or maybe not compromising is not the right word, but you might leave yourself out of position and get countered if you throw a body punch too wildly. So yeah, I mean, just ultimate composure from Topuria, staying in Holloway's face, eventually hurt him with that left hook and then finished him with the right hand, or maybe it was he hurt him with the right hand and finished him with the left hook, I think it was. But the calf kicks looked good from Topuria. The boxing looked great from Holloway as always. Topuria's movement looked incredible. I mean, it was a great fight, man. If you guys didn't watch it, I highly recommend you go back and check it out. I know you might be hurt because you're Max Holloway fans. I'm sure you are. Everybody is. I am too. But, I think losing to somebody on the big stage, I'm happy it was Ilia Topuria because I do feel like Topuria is somebody that can carry that torch that Holloway and Volkanovski once held, and really bring some eyes to this division and keep the long-standing dominance or greatness of featherweight champions that we've seen alive. So. Congratulations to Ilia Topuria. It sucks for Max Holloway, but I think, he can come back to 155. He has plenty of opportunities to fight there. Put him in some fun fights. I don't want to see him fight Islam Makhachev anytime soon, but, somebody like Chandler, Poirier, Oliveira, all these fights would be very fun to see for Max Holloway. And, good problems to have, I suppose. In co-main event, Khamzat Chimaev ran through Robert Whittaker. This was a hard one for me. This was much more of a heartbreaker than the main event for me. I thought Whittaker was going to be able to withstand the early storm from Chimaev and put some real work on him in the later rounds. He unfortunately could not withstand that early storm. He was doing a very good job of defending the takedowns early in the fight, but Khamzat is such a great chain wrestler and was able to, just stick to Robert Whittaker against the fence, riding out the one hook on the against the fence, rather, the leg that's farther away from the fence. Khamzat likes to dig a hook in there and start whopping on you. And that was very effective against Whittaker. Eventually, he got to a position where he was able to sink in a choke or a face crank. And what everybody thought on the broadcast was a broken jaw turned out to actually be pushed in bottom teeth for Robert Whittaker, which just, the picture was like a horror movie. Poor Robert Whittaker. I feel bad for the guy. He said that apparently this has been a thing that he's had his whole life. Weak teeth, essentially. That I guess he got in a fight when he was younger or something, and those teeth never properly recovered from that. He said he called it his Achilles heel, and that Khamzat had found it. It just sucks. It sucks, man. I wanted to see a competitive fight. I wanted to see Khamzat be really tested by a great fighter like Robert Whittaker, but instead we get Khamzat smashing Robert Whittaker and staking his claim for a middleweight title shot. And honestly, I'd much rather see him fight DDP than Strickland again. Strickland had a lackluster decision victory over Paulo Costa. I thought Whittaker's victory over Paulo Costa was much more exciting, much more, it was much more of a statement. And now Khamzat, after smashing Whittaker, I really feel like you can't make an argument for DDP versus Strickland. I think the fight versus DDP for Khamzat makes all the sense in the world, and I'd love to see it. Again, it's the same two true outcomes, right? Either Khamzat's going to take you down and smash you in a round, or he might get tired in the process of doing that and not be able to get that finish in the first round, and then somebody like DDP is in prime territory to come back from that kind of wear and tear. So yeah, I mean, pretty sick shakeup at middleweight, but this is probably going to be the end of the title aspirations for Robert Whittaker. I mean, what is he going to do? He has to win 2-3 more fights and then fight a guy who knocked him out or a guy that broke his teeth. I don't know, man. It's not looking good for our boy. But that's the sport. Excuse me. That's the sport of MMA. You know, the young eat the old. You either retire as a champion or live long enough to see yourself getting finished by future champions. So it is what it is. R.I.P. Robert Whittaker and Max Holloway's title aspirations, but we're moving into the next phase of the sport, it seems. Magomed Ankalaev had a very lackluster decision victory over Alexander Rakic, as is tradition. Not really much more I want to discuss there. I think just make the prayer fight. It's what everybody wants to see. Lerone Murphy beat Dan Ige in a fight that did not play out the way that I expected it to, but the outcome was the same. I thought Lerone Murphy would have a lot more success early in the matchup, and then Ige would come on strong in the third round. It was the opposite. Ige looked really good in the first round, and then strangely got tired. I've never seen him really get tired or have any conditioning problems, and Lerone Murphy was able to turn it up and win that second and third round very convincingly. Char Bullet knocked out Armen Petrosian with that double spinning back fist. Again, not something that I expected. I thought Petrosian was going to have great success against Char Bullet, or at least take this fight to the scorecards. He did do decent in the fight before the knockout, but yeah, Char Bullet, just the guy's a monster and really fun to watch, honestly. So we'll see what happens next time the UFC goes to Abu Dhabi or something, somewhere where he can fight. We'll see who he draws. I'm sure they'll just keep giving him fun striking matchups, which I'm okay with. Ibo Aslan ran through Rafael Carquera. That was pretty, nothing really to take home from there. He just kind of popped him and then kept swinging on him. Jeff Neal finished RDA. He was looking like he was going to beat his ass, and then RDA just kind of slipped and fucked up his knee. It is what it is. Jeff Neal keeps moving up. Mateusz Rebecki versus Miktikbek. Oh, my goodness. This was one of the best fights I've ever seen. I mean, I've been a fight fan for like 15 years now. Jesus Christ, it's crazy to think about. I've been a fight fan for like 15 years now, and it's very rare that you see a fight have so many momentum shifts as this one did, have so much damage as this one did. Great exchanges on the feet, great exchanges on the ground. It was amazing. It was a great fight. I was really, I felt like I was watching the first fight I've ever seen again, and it's very rare that I get that kind of feeling or that kind of chill when I'm watching these things, because I'm pretty burnt out over it, I think. As much as I love the sport, it's hard to get super excited about some of these performances and stuff, but then when you see a fight like this, it reminds you, like, oh yeah, that's why I love this shit. Like, so yeah, I mean, awesome fight. Mateusz Rebecki pulls it out, has a very dominant first round where he beats up on Orolbai, swells up his eye. Second round, Orolbai comes back. He took him down. He was beating him up. It was awesome. It was sick. And then third round, Rebecki was back to hurting Orolbai really bad in the early goings. End of the round ended up being on the bottom position, and Orolbai coming down on him with some ground and pound, but I don't think it was enough to win the round. I think the damage that Rebecki did in the first half of the third round outweighed the damage that Orolbai did in the second half of the third round. So I think the judges got it right. I had picked Rebecki to win in this matchup on the podcast preview, and he ended up being the only underdog on the entire card that cashed, so I'm happy that I picked him. At plus 250, I felt like it was kind of crazy, and the fight obviously played out much closer to that. Although it was a split decision, I do feel like Rebecki deserved the nod. So, Abus Magomedov took out Bruno Ferreira with that arm triangle in the third round. Honestly, great performance from Abus. He got rocked in that second round, but he came out really hot in the first round and took down Bruno Ferreira, which was exactly what he should have done. Ferreira is super dangerous with that power early in the fight. So smart move from Abus to take him down. When he did get rocked, he did a great job of taking him down again. And yeah, I mean, I think we've seen Magomedov kind of turn a corner here. The guy has a lot more cardio than it looked like he would in the beginning goings of his career, or at least in the UFC, I should say, because he did have a little stint in the PFL. And for Bruno Ferreira, I think got to work on that takedown defense a little bit. I mean, obviously Magomedov's a great grappler, but yeah, I mean, I think that was the only thing that kept him from winning this fight was his takedown defense, because he had Abus dead to rights in that second round, and Abus was able to keep that heart up and take him down and, slow down the pace of the fight a little bit, and that was what got him that finish in the third round. So, great performance from Abus. Pretty solid fight overall. Kennedy Nzechukwu finished Chris Barnett, and Nzechukwu at heavyweight looks like a monster. I'm really excited to see where he goes from here. Farid Basharat beat up Victor Hugo. Hugo missed weight by like 10 pounds, so really gangster move by Basharat to take the fight and to beat him. Ismail Naurdiev comes back to the UFC and beats up Bruno Silva. Bruno Silva, poor guy, man. He said after the fight, you could see it in the fight, he didn't look like he wanted to be in there. And then after the fight, he said those words exactly. He said that he's been dealing with a lot of anxiety in the cage. And while he's in the fight, it gets to a point where he just doesn't want to be in there anymore. And, it's really troubling to hear an athlete talk about these kind of things. He said that he's going to take some time off, which I think is much needed. The guy has been in some crazy fights over the years. He's fought guys like, Chris Weidman, Alex Pereira, Brad Tavares, all kinds of legends of this division. So I think it's a good idea. Take a little bit of time off, maybe retire. I don't know, but you don't want to see a guy fight when they don't want to fight. So I wish the best for Bruno Silva. For Naurdiev, solid W, and a good comeback fight for the UFC, or to come back to the UFC with, I should say. Hanat Fakhretdinov absolutely robbed Carlos Leal. It was insane. I was watching this fight live. I had Fakhretdinov over 1.5, and I just saw him getting beat up, and I was like, damn, that's crazy. Like, first fight of the night, and I'm losing, And then the judges called it for Fakhretdinov. I was like, what? And it was absolutely insane. But hey, it is what it is. Ticket cashes either way. So for Carlos Leal, I think he showed great things for his UFC debut, and I'm excited to see where he goes from here. He has awesome leg kicks, good power in his hands, good takedown defense. But Fakhretdinov was able to get that decision off of I don't know how. I mean, biased judges. It is what it is. Call it what it is. All right. So that brings us to next week's card, UFC Fight Night, Moreno versus Albazi. We are going back to Canada, and we're gonna be checking out Albazi versus Moreno. We're also gonna be checking out Blanchfield versus Namajunas. So a couple of flyweight fights to headline the card, one at women's flyweight, one at men's flyweight, both of them 5 rounds, which I think is very important to note, especially for that co-main event. I mean, obviously the main event is 5 rounds, but Blanchfield over 5 rounds is very interesting versus Rose Namajunas, so I'm excited to talk about that. But first things first, let's crash down on that main event. Brandon Moreno, former champion, coming off of a loss to Brandon Royval, is taking on Amir Albazi, who is coming off of a loss over Kai Kara France, a fight that he was supposed to lose, but the judges gave it to him. So he finds himself fighting former champion Brandon Moreno here in what looks to be, honestly, a really tough fight. So, on the Albazi side, you have a very solid jab. You have a solid right leg kick. But more than anything, you have a very dominant grappling game that lends itself to a lot of top position, a lot of submission attempts, not necessarily submission finishes, not necessarily ground and pound finishes, but a very dominant grappling game, that can spell a lot of trouble for a lot of the division. Albazi has had a kind of inconsistent, let's say, UFC career so far. I mean, not inconsistent in the sense that he's losing, because I think he's won every fight in the UFC. He's won every fight he's had in the UFC, but the performances have been inconsistent, right? So he looked great against Malcolm Gordon. He finished him. He looked great against Francisco Figueiredo. Against Alessandro Costa, it was kind of a back and forth fight, but he ended up getting on the knockout in the third round, which was awesome. It was everything he needed at that point. But against August Zamagulov, he had a lackluster performance. Against Kai Kara France, again, a lot of people felt like he lost that fight, myself included. So, not great performances when he fights a tougher fighter like that. But he does very well against lower level competition. And I think he finds himself against a very tough fighter in Brandon Moreno. Brandon Moreno, former champion, looked incredibly well-rounded, looked incredibly, well-versed in every stage of the fight. In that series he had with Figueiredo, we saw him have great success on the feet. We saw him finish Figueiredo on the ground in one of the fights. Cardio has always been a strong suit for Brandon Moreno. The chin has always been there. The grappling defense has always been there. So, we're looking at a fighter who really has every tool in the toolkit the thing that has kept him from being a long-reigning champion or a guy at the top of the division has been some of his decision-making in the octagon. Against Figgy in the fight that he lost by decision, we saw Brandon Moreno come in a little overconfident, I think, and try to be a little too slick instead of, staying the course and doing what got him to the dance. Against Pantoja, he kind of just ran into a brick wall that was Pantoja's giant and boisterous chin, as well as his dominant grappling. So tough fight for Brandon Moreno, and obviously a matchup that is a hard one for him, considering that he's 0-3 against Pantoja over the years. And then against Royval, I think he just kind of got outworked. I thought there was an argument to be made that Moreno won that fight, but it was a super close fight, and a fight where Moreno kind of fell into the trap of using the same technique over and over. I believe it was like a step back overhand. He kept throwing it over and over, and it landed in the first few exchanges, but then after that it was kind of falling flat. And I'd like to have seen him switch up the tactic at that point. I believe he switched camps recently, so I thought maybe it was just some of that. Sometimes when fighters move camps, that first fight is a little bit of a learning curve, let's say, and the fighter doesn't necessarily have their best performance their first fight with a new camp. So hopefully he's kind of settled in where he's at now, and will turn up a lot better on this Saturday. Not that he had a bad performance against Royval. Again, it was a razor close decision, I should say. But what kept him from winning that fight was some of his decision making and going to the well too many times on that combination that he was throwing. So hopefully he can switch it up a little bit more here against Amir Albazi. I do feel like on paper Brandon Moreno should be able to win this fight. Albazi is a very tough competitor and has very interesting stylistic problems to Brandon Moreno, but I believe the cardio advantage is decidedly in Moreno's favor. We've seen Albazi look really bad in the third round against Zaglos Samagulov and look worse for wear in the fourth and fifth round against Kai Kara France in his last fight. Brandon Moreno is somebody who's there the whole time. He does fade himself a little bit, but he's typically very strong throughout the fight. And, I think if this fight does get to later rounds, which I expect it to, I think Brandon Moreno will do well in that fourth and fifth round. So it really comes down to him winning one of the first three rounds, in my opinion. And I trust Brandon Moreno to do that. I expect him to have a bit sharper of a striking toolkit than Albazi. I expect him to be able to defend the takedowns of Albazi relatively well, and if he does get the takedown, I expect Moreno to have enough jiu-jitsu and enough grappling positional awareness to not get submitted. So I like Moreno in this matchup. I think the safest bet would be to bet the over 3.5, I think would be the safest bet. But I'm not mad at Brandon Moreno by decision or just, Brandon Moreno money line. And, I think the winner of this fight, for the division, I think it'd be better if Albazi won because Moreno's been in there with the top guys so many times, and Albazi needs some of those fresh matchups. But I just feel like Moreno's the better fighter, and I think he is going to, get it done on Saturday. It is what it is. So going down the card, you have the women's flyweight co-main event, which we alluded to earlier. We have Erin Blanchfield coming off of that loss against Manon Fiorot, a very demoralizing loss where she just ran into the same step-back counters over and over and over and was not able to get to her takedown, versus Rose Namajunas, who's on a little bit of a win streak she's built for herself at women's flyweight, coming off of a victory most recently over Tracy Cortez and before that Amanda Hebus, both decision victories in which Namajunas just looked to be the more well-rounded fighter and the better striker more than anything. Namajunas, as similar to Moreno, is a former champion who has since switched camps, and we've seen her kind of similar to Brandon Moreno lose a little bit of the luster that we saw make them champions. Maybe I'm being too ham-handed here, but I feel like Rose Namajunas has kind of plateaued since leaving the Whitman camp and just having Pat Barry and a few other dudes as her head coaches. That being said, she's still one of the best fighters in the world at this weight, at any weight for women, or, maybe not any weight, but definitely strawweight and flyweight. And, she's still a very slick striker. Obviously, her grappling is a solid base that she's always had. Still has the same problems that she used to have. Her cardio has not been excellent over the years. But she just is a very experienced fighter and one who, is typically much slicker than her opponents are. And I think that there's a speed difference that people experience, that women experience when they fight Rose Namajunas, that they don't always expect. She typically catches some of these women early in the fight with something that they didn't expect. I mean, obviously the most famous example being Joanna Jędrzejczyk that she caught with the left hook. She also caught Zhang Weili with that head kick in their first fight, I should say. And against Erin Blanchfield, I expect her striking to be the big difference maker. You know, Blanchfield has great grappling when she gets it there, but when she does, she's not able to get it there. She does look a little bit one note on the feet, one-dimensional, I would say. She moves forward very well. She moves forward the whole fight, and she's always in her opponent's face. But in her last fight against somebody who's able to move backwards and stamp on her, stamp a big punch or a big kick on her, it ended up just getting her in trouble over and over, getting her hit a lot in that fight against Manon Fiorot. And I kind of expect a similar thing to happen here against Rose Namajunas. I mean, I'd like Blanchfield to win. Again, I think it's better for the division if she can get it done. I just don't really see a path to victory for her here because Namajunas has always been a great grappler. If Blanchfield can get her down, she might be able to win rounds that way and get a decision victory that way. But I do expect Namajunas' striking to be a marked, I expect there to be a vast gap between the striking skill sets of the two fighters, whereas the grappling is a little bit closer, in my opinion. So if Blanchfield has improved her striking much, which I don't know how much she can in the time frame that she's had between these two fights, it's only been like 6 or 7 months, then I expect her to be able to get this done. But otherwise, I think Namajunas is a very solid fighter here, and I expect her to win a close decision, 48-47 on the scorecards. Either way, I see this fight going the distance. I don't expect Blanchfield to be able to take down and submit Namajunas, and I certainly don't expect Namajunas to be able to knock out Erin Blanchfield. We saw her take some big punches from Manon Fiorot, and Namajunas doesn't have that same pop that she had at strawweight. At flyweight, she doesn't have that same pop. So I think both of these fights in the co-main and main event will go the distance. And I'm going to go with the former champions in both of them, in Rose Namajunas and Brandon Moreno. So, moving further down the card, you got Derek Lewis versus Jonathan Deniz, heavyweight kickboxer, fighting Derek Lewis. I don't like it. I think Lewis is probably going to get tooled up here. Lewis does well when he fights heavyweight grapplers, guys who just want to take him down, that he can just stand up and pop them when they get tired. Guys like Rodrigo Nascimento, guys like Marcin Tybura, guys like, I don't know who else, whatever, maybe not Sergey Spivak, but a lot of other guys that fit in that mold. Against guys that are slick strikers or even just strikers, he doesn't tend to do as well. Guys like Taito Iwasa, guys like Cyril Gane, so I don't expect him to have much success here against Deniz. That being said, Derek Lewis can knock out anybody at any time. He has the most knockouts in UFC history, if I remember correctly. Definitely the most in heavyweight history, so you'd imagine that would translate to overall, because heavyweight has a higher rate of knockouts than any other division. So I'm going to go on a limb and say he has the most knockouts in UFC history. And I wouldn't be surprised if he gets another one this weekend against Deniz, who is pretty inexperienced. But I feel like Deniz has the skill set, the leg kicks, the movement, the jab, to really give Lewis a lot of fits in this fight. But I'd be happy to be proven otherwise. So we'll see what happens. But typically I don't like betting on heavyweight MMA in general, but we'll see what happens. Caio Machado versus Brenson Ribeiro. I mean, not really a ton to say about this fight. Might be a good grappling matchup. I'd probably take Machado just for the explosiveness factor. I'm not a big believer in Ribeiro. Marc-Andre Barriault powerbar versus Dustin Stoltzfus. This looks like an easy victory for Marc-Andre Barriault. He did get knocked out pretty bad only like 4 or 5 months ago against Joe Pyfer, but he draws on Dustin Stoltzfus, who doesn't really have a ton of power coming back his way. So I like Barriault to be able to drown Stoltzfus and do better as the fight goes on. I think Stoltzfus is somebody who kind of fades a bit. But, it should be a fun fight. Mike Malott versus Trevin Giles. Trevin Giles, pretty big underdog coming in here for somebody who just got finished by Neil Magny and Mike Malott. I might take a stab on him at the underdog slot because I feel like Giles will do better as the fight goes on. but it's not out of the realm of possibility that Malat smokes him early. Giles has been finished in the early goings before, and Malat is a very explosive fighter as the fight starts. So wouldn't be surprised to see Malat get it done, but Giles at the underdog spot is a little tasty. Ayman Zahabi versus Pedro Munoz. This is the fight that we've been waiting for Zahabi, a guy who has improved in the octagon. We've seen him kind of grow up in there. I remember when he had his fight against who was it? Was it a Basharat brother? Or yeah, well he beat a Basharat brother, but he lost to Ricardo Ramos. Yeah. When he lost to Ricardo Ramos, there was like a lot of talk, like, oh man, is this guy ever gonna be that guy, pal? You know. And then in his next fight, got beat by Vincent Morales. After that, he took some time off, and coming back to the UFC after that time off has been great for him. He's on a 4-fight win streak, and I think he has the fight IQ certainly to reach the top of the division. And it looks like he's putting together the physical gifts and repetitions necessary to do that too. And I expect him to get it done against an aging, fading, slowing down Pedro Munoz. I think Zahabi has the tools to win this fight. I think he has the IQ to win this fight for sure. But Munoz is a very tough out for anybody, and very hard to finish in general. So I think playing Zahabi by decision here is a safe bet. But we'll see what happens. They have it as a pick'em, and I understand the experience level for Munoz, but I just don't feel like Munoz is able to turn back contenders the way he used to. Ariane Lipski, aka Ariane De Silva, is taking on Jasmine Jasudavicius. Ariane Lipski, or De Silva, whatever you want to call her, let's just call her Ariane. Came in as a KSW champion and has not really lived up to that potential, especially in those first few fights. Lately, she's kind of reached her form a bit, doing a lot better in grappling exchanges against these women that she's fighting and looking vicious like how she was supposed to. I think they call her the elbow. No, not the elbow. The elbow queen was Lena Landsberg, but she had a crazy like Queen Violence or something. Yeah, the Queen of Violence. So she's looked a little bit like the Queen of Violence in her last few performances, but she draws on a very tough fighter here in Jasmine Jasudavicius, and somebody who I think will take advantage of the grappling holes that we've seen early in the career, in the UFC career of Ariane Lipski. Jasudavicius is a stellar grappler. Famously out-grappling Moreno Maverick in an upset victory, and just in general having that tool in her tool belt throughout her UFC career, beating the shit out of Priscilla Cachoeira, a girl who finished Ariane Lipski. So I like Jasudavicius in the spot. I think by decision is probably the most likely outcome, as Lipski has been very hard to finish throughout her career. Again, the only one that I can remember really getting it done was Priscilla Cachoeira, and she is a monster. Oh, okay, well, she's been finished, actually, a couple times before that. It was mostly ground and pound. So, I mean, maybe Davicius can get the finish here, but, you know, I think taking the money line plot is a safe one, maybe over 1.5. I don't know. But I like Jasmine Davicius here pretty confidently. Charles Jourdain versus Victor Henry. Victor Henry should be able to outpace Jourdain here. If Jourdain can land one of his guillotines or some power punches on Henry, he might be able to turn the tides of the fight. But I feel like Henry's going to be in the driver's seat throughout the whole performance here, the whole fight here. And I expect him to get it done on the scorecards. Jack Shore versus Yusuf Zalal. Yusuf Zalal has looked incredible since coming back to the UFC. Has been a very looked very changed in the sense that he's looking for the finish in every space of the fight, and he draws Jack Shore here, who has kind of been on the decline, I would say, these last couple performances, losing the guys like Ricky Simone and Jorgensen Brito. But you know, the difference between those guys and you know, this guy is Jorgensen Brito and Ricky Simone are very physically imposing fighters. Yusuf Zalal, I wouldn't describe as very physically imposing, although he is very technical and very skilled, and he's fighting very ferociously lately. I wouldn't call him a super physical fighter. That being said, I do feel like he has the tools to get this done, and I'm going to take Zalal here. Just the momentum is like completely different courses right now. Zalal seems to look like the best form he's ever looked, and Jack Shore doesn't. So I'm going to take Zalal here. Tough fight for Jack Shore. He might be able to get it done, but yeah, I think Zalal is more likely to pull this one out. Probably second, third round. I think. Yeah, maybe I'll just play him over 1.5 to play it safe. Jack Shore's a pretty tough dude, but you never know. The way Zlal's been fighting lately might get him out there in the first round. So next you got Alexander Romanov versus Rodrigo Nascimento. Alexander Romanov will smash you in a round or a couple minutes, or if you defend the takedowns and can grapple slightly, he gets knocked out, or he just loses all faith in himself and crumbles like we saw against Volkov. So Rodrigo Nascimento is a good grappler, and I think we're going to see Romanov crumble in this fight. So I'm going to take Nascimento here at pick'em odds. I love it. Yeah, I expect him to get it done by finish, probably second or third round. Serhii Sidey, whatever, the Canadian gentleman, is fighting Garrett Armfield. This is a really fun fight. I believe Sidey should get it done, but Armfield is a live dog at 160. I think they have him at 130 now. So, play with caution, but I like Sidey in the spot. Chad Anheliger, Jesus Christ, I'm butchering these names. Chad Anheliger versus Cody Gibson. I expect Gibson to get it done here. I think he's the scrappier, more proven fighter, and I think he'll probably get it done by decision. But I like Cody Gibson in the spot a lot. Odds makers have him at minus 190, which I think is a fair assessment. And then to open up the fight card, we have Jamie Lynn Horth versus Ivana Petrovic, two women who should probably not be in the UFC. So hopefully that fight will be fun and entertaining, because I don't think it will be very high level. Let's go down the betting slip for this card. In the main event, I'm really not sure who to pick here, so I'm just going to go with the fight to go over 3.5 rounds. Co-main event, I'm going to do the same thing, man. I'm sorry. I'm playing it safe, guys. I'm going over 3.5 in the co-main event, over 3.5 in the main event. I'm not going to touch Lewis versus Denise, as I feel like either guy can get the finish there. I am going to take Marc-Andre Barriault. I am going to take Ayman Zahabi. And I'll take Jasmine Jasudavicius, Yusuf Zalal, and Rodrigo Nascimento. And I'll take Cody Gibson. Fuck it. All right, so we got over 3.5 in the main event, over 3.5 in the co-main event. We're going to take Marc-Andre Barriault money line. We're going to take Zahabi money line. We're going to take Jasudavicius money line. We're going to take Zalal money line, Rodrigo Nascimento money line, and Cody Gibson money line. So we have an 8-pick betting slip for you there. Play with caution. Play at your own risk. I always recommend round robining. Don't go out here, put $15 on 8 picks and get mad at me in the comments when the judges give it to, whatever, Pedro Munoz instead of Ayman Zahabi or whatever else. Round robin. Save yourself some money. You know what I mean? Instead of putting $75 or, whatever, $10 here and $10 there, $15 there, put them all together, round robin, 4, 5, 3, whatever, however many times of picks you want, and that way, if we lose 1 or 2 picks, we still make money out on the night. I think that's the safest way to bet MMA, and that's what I'll always recommend that you guys do. So that pretty much draws us to a conclusion here. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for watching. Honestly, a pretty good card, all things considered. The UFC typically shows out when they have a crowd, and I think this weekend is no exception. Last week was awesome, and this week looks to be pretty solid too. We were in the green last week, going 3-2, and let's hope we can keep our winning ways up this card. So, thank you very much, y'all. I love you, appreciate you, and we will see you next week when we discuss Neil Magny versus Carlos Prates. Very exciting. Also, keep an eye out for that Alexei Oleinik doc I'm coming out with. I know I've been talking about it for a while, but I swear I'm working on it. It's coming out, all right? Appreciate y'all. Much love. Peace out.